I will now call to order the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session, October 25th, 2023. Gary Schmidt, what's up?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Commissioner Savas is out of the office today. Commissioner Schrader is on her way. The first policy session today is ZDO-285, Minor and Time-Sensitive Comprehensive Plan and Zoning and Development Ordinance Amendments, Climate-Friendly and Equitable Communities, Parking Components. That was a mouthful. Transportation and Development staff will present. Dan Johnston, the Director of the Department, Martha Fritzie, Principal Planner, Karen Burig, Long Range Planning Manager. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith. Commissioners, we are here to talk about, as the county administrator so eloquently articulated that mouthful, climate-friendly and equitable communities rulemaking. This is not new to you. We've talked to you about this topic before. This basically is a mandate from the state to implement certain revisions to our code. You've taken action on some things and or given guidance on this previously, and we are here to talk specifically around the off-street parking component. And there are some options for you to consider, and we are here to kind of share, not we, they are here to share the specificity around those options and to have a discussion with you about how you'd like to proceed. And these aren't easy discussions, so I'm just going to be frank. Some of them are costly discussions that require some additional discussion should you choose to take those paths, but we'll leave that discussion to later in the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Martha and to Karen for a presentation.
Welcome.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. My name
Hold
is...
this nice and close.
Excuse me?
Hold this nice and close so we can hear. You know, actually, just so you information, the people online can hear better than we can in this room because these don't amplify, they just record. So that's why I'm always asking our guests to pull them closer.
Perfect. Hi, I am Karen Burig. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager at Clackamas County, and I'm joined with Martha Fritzie, Principal Planner. And today we're here to talk about a project that is on the 23-25 Long Range Planning Work Program. And so that project, as we were just discussing, is the minor and time-sensitive amendments package. And that package really is pulled together to address any new state, federal mandates, clarify existing language, correct errors, and adopt optional provisions that really require only minimal analysis. That's the intent of that package. And as a part of that package, really has 5 elements this year. 2 of those elements you've already talked about 2 weeks ago, having to do with the accessory dwelling units and the recreational vehicles. Today we are going to focus on the 3rd element, which is the parking components, just the parking elements of the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. Those rules are a part of the transportation planning rule. There are 2 more elements of those minor and time-sensitive amendment package. We don't necessarily anticipate coming before you for direction on those because those are mandatory requirements. They'll be folded into the package and will be able to be discussed at the time that we're going through those public hearings. So with that, just as a high-level reminder, we actually, as Dan said, we have been here before to talk about this particular item. Back in December of 2022, we came and we talked about what was called Pathway A, or Parking A, of the rule package that was implemented at the end of the last year. That has to do with the removal of parking mandates around transit corridors, and we started implementing that at the very beginning of this year. At that time, we also talked about the fact that we had requested a time extension for the implementation of Parking B. We're here today to talk about Parking B. So back in March of 2023, we also came forward and discussed with you the different pathways that are available as a part of Parking B. Today, we're going to talk about those pathways again. At the time in March, there were a couple of things that were kind of hanging out there and still needing to be addressed, which caused us to sort of not do additional work until some things roll out farther. One was that a bill had been introduced into the legislative session. The bill had to do with prohibiting the state from enforcing the CFEC rules. That particular bill did not pass. That legislation did not pass. There also had been a lawsuit that several different jurisdictions had regarding challenging CFEC. And CFEC is the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities, so sometimes we may say CFEC. That lawsuit is still pending. And we don't know the timeline for that decision. So basically, our timeline and our extension is quickly approaching. We are required to be able to implement elements of the climate-friendly rules related to parking by June 30th, 2024. That's our timeline. So with that, we're here to talk about what are the different ways that we can move forward and be able to get your direction on the pathway that we should be looking at as we develop our ZDO amendments. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Martha, who will provide you with a lot of the details about the different pathways.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. So before we start talking about the pathways under Parking B, I just wanted to make sort of 4 introductory points, things to think about as we're moving forward. One is what we're talking about today is off-street parking mandates or off-street parking requirements during development. We're not talking about changing anything about on-street parking. We, as Karen mentioned, this deadline is looming. We have about 8 more months in which to change our code to implement the Parking B requirements. And that seems like a long time, but when you're making code amendments that, as you probably know, that goes by pretty quickly because we do need to make code amendments and have hearings in order to adopt these changes. Staff is aware that some commissioners have been interested in talking about a parking management plan. And I don't know if that conversation is still going on, but we do need to keep in mind that if that is something that is being pursued by the commission, it does need to be done within the context of the CFEC rules to the extent that whatever is in the parking management plan relates to off-street parking mandates. And then finally, in that time period between the last time we talked about Parking B and now, the state has also made some changes to the rules, to all of the CFEC rules, but have made some tweaks and what they call clarifications and corrections, made small changes to the Parking B rules, which I can talk about a little bit. At the end of the day, it doesn't change staff's recommendation about the pathway that we think is appropriate for the county, but it does change some of the nuances and some of the technicalities with the options that you have in front of you for pathways to take. And so with that, under Parking B, there are 3 available pathways or options. In all 3 of these, all of the parking mandates that were removed under Parking A, so the buffer areas around transit where we cannot require off-street parking anymore, all of those remain. So that's a commonality with all 3 of them. There are additional code amendments that we have to make with all 3 pathways that relate to standards for parking lots and some other things like that, and we will make those code amendments. So the big differences between the pathways 1, 2, and 3 are listed and summarized in your staff summary, but essentially come down to this. Pathway 1 involves removing all off-street parking mandates in the urban area. This doesn't affect rural lands. It's inside the metro urban growth boundary. And so that means we would no longer require off-street parking with development, but we could allow off-street parking with development. And actually, Karen, I think, articulated this really well to me earlier when we were talking about this meeting today, and that really, I think the way that you can look at it as it's not about whether or not there's parking, it's about who's making the decision about what parking is provided. And is it the government making the decision and saying you have to do this, or is it the developer making the decision and saying, I think that Clackamas County is a fairly suburban market and has arguably not very good transit access, and so we don't think developments are marketable with no parking at all. That is actually what we have been seeing in these transit corridors currently, where there are no parking mandates. Developments have been coming in, and the developer's been choosing to provide parking. Admittedly, it's often at parking ratios lower than what our zoning ordinance would have required. But parking, pathway 1 under parking B would make that apply everywhere in the urban area, not just along those transit corridors. Pathways 2 and 3 are a lot more complicated. They involve further reductions, so removing or reducing parking requirements for a number of different types of developments in different areas. And then pathway 2 is called the fair parking policy, and you need to pick 2 out of 3 items that are listed on page 3. And on pathway 3, there's a whole laundry list of additional parking reductions, and then you need to either create a residential parking district where on-street parking is managed through paid permits, meters, or other payments, or require parking for multifamily units to be unbundled. Unbundling means that the parking space is priced separate from the unit. So if you're leasing an apartment, you have to pay extra to get parking. You can choose not to pay extra, obviously. Under pathway 2, there also are unbundling requirements. Some of the options, the other options there include creating a tax on commercial parking lot revenue, or creating an employee, what's it called? A flexible commute benefit, requiring certain employers to provide flexible commute benefits. And those are lots and lots of words that are confusing, and quite frankly, pathways 2 and 3 are complicated and confusing. In both of those pathways, it would require zoning code amendments, but in addition to those, it would require a new program to be developed, a program that the county does not have, and it would require either a new program to create the structure to enforce this unbundling of parking, which generally, in our eyes, falls under landlord-tenant rules, or it would require a new program to create an on-street parking district, which would require implementation, the infrastructure for whatever paid parking systems you have, enforcement. And so for those reasons, largely for those reasons, staff's recommendation is to proceed with the code amendments under pathway 1, which is the removal of all parking mandates. Quite frankly, it is less complex and less costly to implement. It really, both in terms of staff time and in terms of longer-term implementation, it really goes along with this theme that you have been hearing from the Planning Division and that you will continue to hear, that we need to streamline our regulations and not increase complexity, both for staff and for our customers. And quite frankly, when you look at all of the items that are included in pathways 2 and 3, it's hard to really be able to articulate what is a great value added versus the time and expense that it would take to implement both of those pathways. The biggest difference is that we would be able to retain some parking mandates in some of our industrial areas, and some, but not all, not nearly all, of our single-family neighborhoods. And other than that, it just becomes a very complex thing to implement. And so I'm happy to answer detailed questions about each of these pathways, but I'm going to stop talking now.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you very much. You're in a very hard position because of state legislation, but I have some questions before I go to the other commissioners. The status of the lawsuit. Let's say that somehow the lawsuit is rendered in favor of what counties want to do, then let's say we adopt this today, and then we have this lawsuit that says otherwise. What happens to all of our work?
So I think one of the things that I want to be clear about is that we're not adopting anything today. We're just getting direction
Oh, good.
from the board on being able to develop the amendments.
Don't tell me we're not adopting anything today when there are very specific recommendations. Now, hell will freeze over before I vote in favor of any of this. I don't care about the state legislation. I think it was passed, and I think in the 23 session, they denied any request at reasonableness, hoping that the counties would somehow fall in line and obey them, taking away more land rights. So then they can say at the end of the day, oh, look, counties voted for it anyway. I don't think we should adopt any of this, commissioners. Every single city that I've talked to in this county is equally as enraged. We have 8 months. Can't get it done in 8 months? I personally don't care. I cannot go down this line whatsoever and vote in favor of this. I understand staff time is very precious. Every single one of you 5 people in this room are my favorite people at this county. You have to know that, okay? You have been dealt.
Sorry, Gary.
You have been dealt.
It's over here.
You guys are, I'm talking planning, yeah. You've been dealt a horrid situation. But it doesn't mean me as an elected person in this county trying to represent Clackamas County voters' rights want. This parking is insane. Now, you mentioned some parking management plan. That's off-street parking. That doesn't have anything to do with what we're asking today, so that is off the table for today. I just can't, I'm not voting on, commissioners, it's up to you what kind of motion you want to bring forward, but I told Dan Johnson a couple years ago, at what point do we start saying no to these horrific mandates by the legislature? Today, I am starting to say no to this horrific mandate, and Dan, don't argue with me. Thank you very much. We have some commissioners in line. Commissioner West.
Couple thoughts. It's hard to follow that. Thank you, Chair. On pathway one, one clarifying question. As I think it's important if anybody's listening in that we break down some of these technical terms just really quickly. We talk about in pathway one, removing all parking mandates and near the Clackamas Regional Center, CRC. Could you guys define that for me, please?
So the Clackamas Regional Center?
Yep.
So the Clackamas Regional Center is around where the Clackamas Town Center is.
Okay.
There's actually a boundary that we have adopted into our plans that
Okay.
indicate where the Clackamas Regional Center is. But it is generally down to Sunnybrook and then north up to probably about Causey, and then west to about Fuller and probably over to Stevens.
Thank you. And so it leads to my next point. That area and other urbanized / suburban areas here in Clackamas County in the metro area without this policy already suffer from really bad parking policy that feels more like stack 'em and pack 'em than actually making safe, livable spaces for people to be able to exist in, them and the people and their families. And this is one of those areas. I actually think that this area has been negatively impacted by the amount of density that's around it and the type of activity that happens within this area. And this development, I believe this policy indirectly would exacerbate problems that already exist around Causey, 82nd, and the Clackamas Town Center area. Even in Wilsonville, we really struggle. And when I was a city councilor, we really struggled with parking, and it was one of those things that on a local level where people were just fed up and tired. And a lot of this is bad policy out of Portland. It's Portland creep into Clackamas County. It's dense urban areas dictating how we shall be in places like Clackamas County and the rest of the state. This is really bad policy. This really takes away the ability for people to get to work easily and to pick up their kids from soccer practice and get to the grocery store, and they make us have these horrible mandates without providing other alternatives to actually be mobile. I know we're not giving you like we're not saying this is what we're going to do, but you guys are tasked with the horrible, you guys are tasked with this. So as staff, you mentioned we could have no mandates and just be open, and we could, and then allow, right? And so that made me think, okay, could we recommend? Could we promote? Could we say, can we be a pro parking? We don't have to, sometimes we don't need a mandate. We just create great partnerships with our builders, and we say, hey, we would really encourage you to really consider some parking here also that's included. We're not going to put anything on you. We can't by law, but maybe we could find a way to be proactive in making sure we get the parking we want with option one. It sounds like I'm a no-go. Hell freezes over before pathway 2 or 3 happen with me on this board. And I also think, maybe speaking to the board is, do we join in on the lawsuit? Do we write it?
We've had an opportunity, and Dan, we've discussed this before.
Okay.
And Dan Johnson, would you like to answer that?
I would love to answer that, because I was never going to argue. I was going to answer your question. Your question was specific to the fact of, one, a reminder, you got a lot of stuff going on. We are we are part of that lawsuit that's currently underway.
It's like amicus brief, or
we're like friends of the court.
Friends of the court.
Yeah,
okay.
and that's what I was texting. I'm like, there's a term for it. I can't remember what it is. We're like friends of somebody.
Yeah.
So we are party to that lawsuit. Okay. The specific question that you ask is, what happens if that is successful? If that is successful, again, we are here just seeking guidance on options to put forward, and there are different paths to take, but let's just imagine that we move forward through a process and we adopt something. If that lawsuit is successful, we can repeal all of it. Basically, a repeal of that. That was the question that was asked. What happens if it's successful? Or one, if it happens before the adoption, we just part ways with it, basically have a formal discussion with you and say, we're ending this process, we're moving on to other great work we need to do. So.
Well, pathway 1 is the easiest to claw back, because we're not really clawing anything back, right?
One of the examples you shared, because I'm intimately familiar with the town center, I hate to acknowledge that publicly, not because I go there a lot, but because I dealt with their master plan. I mean, they have major tenants. And I'm going to go to one of the statements that was said earlier. These major tenants, as a part of their lease agreements, have minimum parking requirements they want. And so we actually had to wrestle with that, because we had standards that were different, that required less. That's irrelevant to them, because their leases are more important to them, obviously, than any requirements we have. So any impacts we did to that project that reduced their parking caused significant issues there. So we had to find workarounds for that. I want to say, like, their parking requirements are 4 per 1,000 or something like that. And so they're actually higher than the standards, the mins that we had within our requirements. And so you do have a lot of circumstances, and those are with these big tenant providers. I think Kimco across the street that does the Target, or does the Promenade facility, has similar parking standards. So with these larger projects, these folks want parking. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But there will be some smaller commercial projects that may say, great, you know what, I don't have any parking standards. We'll just have folks park on the street. So
yeah, this just really fails to like deal with the reality of how we live. It's like Portland wants us all to like live in little pods and ride our bikes everywhere across, lifeless, homeless bodies. Like this is all tied together. This is the same ideological framework informing these policies, and it's just it just is not conducive to life in Clackamas County. I don't know. I live out here because I don't want to live that way.
I'm sure we'll have more discussion. Thank you, Commissioner West. Commissioner Scholl, you're up next.
Yes, good morning. Let me see if I understand this. If we were to adopt parking rules B, pathway 1, does that mean that that adoption does not affect any parking inside the metro urban growth boundary and other city urban growth boundaries? That's not affected, right?
So it only affects properties inside the metro urban growth boundary, but outside of cities. I mean, cities,
Yes.
all the cities have
Okay.
to follow these rules as well, but they're making their own decisions about which pathway to go.
Okay. And,
Cities inside of
excuse
metro.
me, let me ask my question.
Just a moment.
Commissioner West, I have the floor.
I just want to.
Thank you,
Ben, please.
Commissioner West. So if we have a project coming in unincorporated Clackamas County, after we adopt Parking Rules B, Pathway 1, what will be the ability of the permitting department to effect a project's parking requirements? Martha, am I getting this right?
So I think I'm hearing you correctly, and I will try to answer it. If we go down pathway 1, we remove parking mandates inside the urban area, a developer comes in to build something in urban unincorporated Clackamas County, they bring us their plans and they show 10 parking spaces, we say, okay, great, you can have 10 parking spaces. If they show 0 parking spaces, we say, okay, great, you can have 0 parking spaces. We cannot require they have the off-street parking, but we can let them have it. We can allow them to have it.
Okay, okay. And we can allow them to have it if we adopt Parking Rules B, Pathway 1, but we would not be able to allow them to have it if we waited till after June of 2024 and were subjected to Pathway, or to Parking Rules A. Is that correct? Because Parking Rules A is going to end up being more restrictive. Is that not correct?
No. So parking A is already in effect.
Yes.
We cannot require parking in certain areas in the urban unincorporated county. Parking B is what we're talking about. If we don't adopt anything related to the parking B rules by June 30th, 2024, option 1 goes into effect anyway. No parking mandates. So we can choose option 1 and write the code amendments, or we can not do anything and we have to implement option 1 anyway. The difference is we'd be implementing it straight out of state law, which is a little more cumbersome and confusing, certainly for customers.
Okay. Well, one more question. On the lawsuit, do we have a timetable or expected date that that's going to be resolved? Dan Johnson?
I will, let me reach out regarding that question, and I'll see
Yeah,
if I have additional
okay.
information here shortly. I
Okay.
guess I want to go back to your second question, though. Fundamentally,
Yeah.
and Martha was spot on, we have no ability to control the amount of parking a private developer would propose on their project. It could be from 0 to 100. We do have the ability to make sure there's adequate circulation, that the parking spaces work, things of that nature. But the minimum number or the number of parking spaces provided, that is what would be removed. It would be associated with what the private developer wishes to provide.
Okay. Karen, would you?
So I also want to add the importance of the fact that we are already implementing parking A, which is we already in the corridors, these corridors around transit. So I believe it's a half a mile around our frequent transit line, 3/4 of a mile around the light rail stations. We already are implementing the state rules of no parking mandates.
Okay.
And that will continue on, and it's part of, that influences our recommendation to move forward with Pathway 1, because we already are implementing no parking mandates in areas of the county.
Okay, so one last question. If we don't entertain the staff recommendation today, and we do nothing, what then?
State law goes into effect.
On June 2024.
Right.
And, okay, final question. If that happens, what benefit would you be, at that date, would you be able to look back at today if we adopted your recommendation and say that this county received or seeing a benefit from enacting your recommendation today?
So let's see if I understand your question.
Okay.
What would be the benefit
Let me
of?
rephrase it. Let me rephrase it, if I may. June 2024, we don't adopt your recommendation. The situation that we'd have then, compared to the situation we'd have then if today we adopted your recommendation, what's the difference?
Right.
What's in the benefit to the county?
Right. The benefit to the county is that we would have clearer rules to be able to implement at the time it becomes enforceable. And so that what we're asking today is to be able to make changes to go through the process, to make amendments to our zoning code to reflect state law. And therefore, a person who comes to the counter could look at our rules and understand what is being implemented. So that's the benefit of moving forward with a direction today versus not moving forward today and implementing state law, let's say, in July 1st.
Okay, good. I understand. Thank you.
We can come back if you have more questions, Commissioner Scholl. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
So where was the development community on this? Do we know? Where was the developers? That's a political question, I'm sorry, and I'm curious. Were they like overjoyed about the fact that they have no parking requirements?
It's probably more of a dollars and cents discussion with our development community, because essentially when you look at the pro forma for a project, parking's a big part of that pro forma. And so when you look at the pro forma, it's basically what is the cost to do the project and what's the rate of return I have on it. And if my costs are upfront are basically I have to provide less parking, I can provide more space to get more rental rate on, you're making more revenue on that and you have less cost. So I would assume that they are in support of it. From a profitability standpoint, that doesn't mean, do I think the development community will come in here and have no parking? No, I don't believe that.
No, I don't think so either. That wouldn't be their pragmatists. I'm just kind of curious how that all played out, and I can check into that. I shouldn't put you in the position to answer that. So I'm just thinking pragmatically here. I don't like this either.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
not it.
sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Go ahead, finish.
I don't like this either. However, if we're going to be pragmatic, it's kind of like, let's not kill the messengers, okay? And number two, it gives us more, it's not because I like this, but it gives us more control as a government entity to manage it ourselves rather, because if the state's going to come through and we're going to have to follow, whatever sausage they pulled together, that could be a nightmare. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Pragmatically, if we manage it ourselves, we can do it in a much more local way that minimizes the harm we think this is, we may politically think this is, causing. So it kind of gives us a little more autonomy. Now, but the unknown in this is the lawsuit. So really the decision is, do we wait and just table this today? Fine. Wait and see what happens, and then be in a position where we're going to have to implement what the state wants us to do anyway, even though we think it's ridiculous. Or do we do something now and then claw it back? So to me, it's my question to my commissioners. Just, okay, what do you want to do to go forward? If you want to table it, and then we'll just see what happens.
I would like to respond to you.
That's fine, yeah. I mean,
First of all, nobody's shooting the messenger,
oh, I know that.
so I want to be very clear on that. Just because I object to what's happening here, everybody knows I love them.
I know.
I don't know why we have to do this today. I know you want 8 months to plan, but guess what?
Table it.
That may not be doable. I suggest, commissioners, I want to make a point. So we have no parking. We take away these parking, but people go to visit people who live in apartments. I go to visit let's say grandkids or something. Where am I going to park my car? Oh, I know, I'm going to go down on Walnut Street in front of somebody's house where I don't belong, and all the side streets fill up, and you start parking in front of somebody's driveway and mailbox, and it just creates absolute chaos and pandemonium. And that is not fair to the people who've owned these houses in rural areas, and that's the issue. And that's so unfair. I mean, we restrict something here, but we still have growth. Where's the growth going to go? They're going to go where they think they can go. So what I'd like to see, Commissioners, I'd like to see we vote on option 3. We totally refuse to implement the state law, and we become a test case for the state of Oregon, and we buck this horrific mandate. That's what I would like to see us to do. But, it's really up to you. I'm not voting for any of this because at AOC, at Associated Oregon Counties, I think they're finally starting to turn around and say, maybe the one item that we, all 36 counties, need to be joined on, and that is unfunded and underfunded mandates to counties, because we all have the same constituency. I say that every time I'm with the state legislators. We have the same constituency. They voted for you and they voted for me. The difference is the counties are the boots on the ground, and we deal with the people every single day. We do the building. We do the social services. We have people come before us every week and say, boy, that was a stupid idea. Why'd you do it? Well, that goes over real well, okay? So I'm really having a lot of heartburn with this. I don't think we have to do it today. And I don't know why we're here, but staff wanted it. So we have Ben and we have Mark.
Yeah, to Commissioner Schultz's question, clarification on that, circling back, it was a good question. Does this impact, just clarify for me, does it impact cities like Estacada and Molalla within their city limits, or is it only within the metro area? Because you said something that was,
Boundary.
because you said something like within, how you worded it confused me a little bit. I wanted to make sure I was understanding what the boundaries are here.
So it affects cities within the Portland metro boundary. It affects, you're going to have to help me out here, other cities that are a certain size, and I don't know what that size is.
Okay.
In Clackamas County, it does not affect Estacada or,
Could it
I
Canby,
don't think it
Sandy?
affects Canby or Sandy,
No,
does it? Okay.
these are only applicable, these rules are only applicable in MPO areas, and so it does not impact our rural cities.
Happy Valley's joined on the lawsuit.
Okay,
So,
But Dan has a question to answer the lawsuit. Do you mind,
go for it, jump in.
Dan?
I think it was Commissioner Scholl that asked for an update on the lawsuit. County Council is intrigued by this discussion, so they're tracking all this online right now. Essentially, I got an update from one of our attorneys. Yes, the oral arguments were held on July 12th, 2023. And right now, it's unclear when the courts will issue a decision. That's kind of the current status.
Okay.
So that isn't a lot of great information, but it's just basically an update about where that lawsuit's at.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to do this today. I don't want to pick anything. It's
I'm fine
bad.
with that.
And, we know our constituents better than they do, which I think the chair just got to, and and I kind of want to be a firewall against bad policy that hurts my constituents, and I think this is bad policy.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
I have two questions. The first one has to do with the recent apartment complexes that have been built. The ones that come to mind are the ones in Happy Valley. Large complexes that have adequate parking. At least one parking place per apartment, and in some cases, 2 parking spaces per apartment, with almost no peripheral on-street overflow parking. That would be at 162nd and Sunnyside, and the new apartment complex coming up on 172nd north of Sunnyside. Now, my question is this. Those developers provided adequate off-street parking with their developments. Was that decision made under this current state requirement?
No.
In other words, did those developers on their own provide that, or did the city of Happy Valley influence the action there? How did that come about?
So those apartments were permitted through the city of Happy Valley.
Okay,
I do know that Happy Valley has not adopted anything under these parking B rules. I would doubt those are in any of the transit buffers under parking A. So my speculation is those fell under sort of the old rules of having to provide a certain amount of parking, but I don't know for sure.
okay. And then the next question has to do with Chair Smith's idea about option 3. I'm going to read option 3. Okay? Option 3 says, do nothing, thereby allowing the requirements of pathway 1 in parking B, i.e. no parking mandates, to take effect and be implemented directly out of the state law on July 1st, 2024, or possibly earlier if the state were to withdraw the county's time extension. Okay. That basically is waiting until our time runs out and we do nothing. And that's exactly what it says, we do nothing. And so on 1 July 2024, we were subjected to the state requirements. Now, my question for Mr. Johnson and Karen and Martha, are we going to be able to have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more willing ability to affect the action on parking issues if we go ahead and adopt your recommended option this morning?
So, yes, this may not be the last conversation that we have with parking. And so I want to be clear that, as Karen mentioned, we're not adopting anything today. What we are trying to do, and the reason that we're here months ahead of time, is that we need to put together the package of amendments. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, the technical writing, public notices, any public outreach that has to be done, and then a series of public hearings to adopt whatever amendments end up in this larger package. We would not expect to come to the Planning Commission and to you for hearings until like spring of 2024. So there is a little bit of time, but that time does
Yeah.
go by quickly
Okay.
when you have to do all of those other items.
Yeah.
If you choose not to move forward today, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind later, but it does more or less ensure that you're going to be going with option 1 because, with pathway 1, because pathways 2 and 3 do involve a lot more time and work and coordination with other agencies.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, pathway 2 and no-go, pathway 3 no-go. I personally, considering what you've said today, understand the benefit of your recommendation. I would do that today, but doesn't sound like we have a lot of support for it.
Okay, staff, have you completed your presentation? Just because we make no decision today and we just do nothing, June 30th is not exactly our last time date that we can consider. I do think the lawsuit's important. I do think it's important, if not now, when do we stop this? Every time we turn around in this county, our land use is being taken away, our livability rights. We are not Portland. And they want us out of our cars. It's a climate action plan. It's very clear they don't want people driving cars. Yet we don't have infrastructure available for EVs, and a lot of people don't like them. They're too expensive. So at what time, who says no to this stuff, commissioners? Now, we have led on many, many uncomfortable and issues that are controversial on this. And I have to say, for the most part, the people whom we represent are in support of that. Staff, I think you're wonderful, but I don't know that I have anybody here who wants to make a motion.
We don't need a motion to table.
We don't need a
can
motion
just
to
say
do
we're making
nothing.
no decision today.
I just think that's fine.
All right.
And I will not entertain a motion since I don't hear anybody really on this. Gary, is that appropriate?
That's appropriate, yes.
Okay. I think our session has ended.
So essentially, staff is going to stand down from this discussion until the board has an interest in bringing it back forward.
Wait,
for
And
consideration.
something will need to change. And you folks let Gary or me know if something has changed that would necessitate bringing it back to the board for another discussion.
Certainly when there's a lawsuit decision, that would be a time to come back to the board.
Really? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Drinks are on me.
Oh, yes, they are.
Can we come? Does that include the commissioners, I hope? No, right.
So Chair, our next session has some outside guests who are not here yet. Would you like to take a short recess?
Yes, and we will start at 11?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We are back. The Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session, round number 2. Gary Schmidt, what's up?
Thank you, Chair Smith. The next policy session is the United States Housing and Urban Development Oregon Field Office update. We have from the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Office here in Oregon, the Director, Brian Guinea, and Kirsten Ray, who's Senior Management Analyst. They asked to give a quick update to the full board, and Chair Smith has agreed, so there'll be a quick presentation and then a time for questions and answers from the board from our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So welcome, Brian and Kirsten, and please go ahead.
All right. Good morning, Chair Smith, councilors, Administrator Schmidt. Thank you very much for having us this morning. My name is Brian Guinea, and I am the Director of the Oregon Field Office for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kirsten Ray. I'm a Senior Management Analyst in the Oregon Field Office of HUD.
So we are your HUD field office. We have 47 staff that are based here in Oregon, and we wanted to come before you just to give an update of the programs, policies, operations that are going on, not just in Oregon, but in Clackamas County. I've got some slides here. They're more handouts for you or your staff for later. We've got a lot of the data hyperlinked, so we're briefly just going to touch on some of the things, some of our work that's going on in the state and in Clackamas County specifically. All right, so we look at the whole picture for Oregon. Much of this information you're all very familiar with. 4.2 million folks in the state. 1/3 of Oregonians live in rural Oregon. We have 9 federally recognized tribes, but what we really focus on at HUD is the 18,000 homeless folks across the state. 61% of those are unsheltered. When compared with all the other states, and this is reported every year for the point-in-time counts in the annual homeless assessment reports that go to Congress, when compared with all other states, Oregon is number 4 in the nation for people experiencing homelessness who are unsheltered. Only California, Mississippi, and Hawaii have a higher rate than us. During the COVID pandemic, from 2020 to 2022, we had the second largest absolute increase in unsheltered homelessness in the country. By percentage, and again, driving around our communities, driving around the state, this will unfortunately be no surprise to you, but we're by percentage number 1 for people with families and children who are unsheltered. We're number 1 for homeless individuals that have chronic patterns, chronic conditions. And Oregon as a whole is in the top 10 states of renters that spend more than 25% of their income on rent, that were rent burdened. But we're here also today to talk about a lot of the success, and we want to recognize Clackamas County for the truly exceptional work of the county departments and the integration of services in reducing homelessness and unsheltered homelessness. Last year's point-in-time count, the 2023 point-in-time count, was the first time that a tri-county area in Oregon, Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas, did a joint point-in-time count with Portland State University. And the preliminary numbers, as you all know, were released earlier this year. The full point-in-time count will be released to Congress, we expect in December this year. But Clackamas County's unsheltered homelessness went down. 30% of homelessness went down in the last point-in-time count. 45% decrease in the unsheltered population, 14% decrease in the sheltered population, 6,500 residents that were served for homeless prevention and housing programs. And that is something that we want to recognize and highlight and not just share with other communities in Oregon, but all across the country as well, because we look at it, and I'm sure as you do too in your county departments, keeping people in their homes, prevention from a taxpayer return on investment, from educational outcomes, healthcare, keeping people employed in their jobs, keeping people in their homes, preventing homelessness is much more cost effective than rehousing folks that are already on the street, already experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So the street outreach programs that you have at the county, the integration with mental health services, from where we sit at the federal level, we want to highlight that, celebrate that, and make sure that story is told.
And the successes of Clackamas County are recognized nationally at HUD, specifically with the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. And the part of the ARPA funds, HUD provided 70,000 emergency housing vouchers to public housing authorities across the country. And Clackamas County Housing Authority received 41 of those emergency housing vouchers. And within just 1 month, those were all leased up. There's a tenant success story that I've printed out here. It's only one of 7 success stories that HUD recognizes throughout the whole country, and we're so excited to see a community here in Oregon reflected at that scale. So these vouchers, they're used to provide housing opportunities for people who are homeless or who are at risk of homelessness. And you can read about a couple here, Holland and Gina, who had been living in their car for 2 years before being connected to this program. Again, it's a great reflection of the partnership between the continuum of care here in Clackamas County and the Public Housing Authority. So we're really excited about that and wanted to make sure that you knew all about that we are recognizing this at the national level.
All right, I wanted to zoom kind of back out for a second and talk about the overall funding that comes into the state of Oregon. It's about $7 billion a year from HUD, and the vast majority of that, you wouldn't even know HUD is involved. HUD and FHA backed mortgages through private lenders for first-time home buyers. You go to buy a home, you qualify at a certain income limit, your mortgage broker says, oh, well, an FHA loan would be the best for you. And a lot of that comes in through these mortgage insurance programs. On the other end of that, we insure private developers and their lenders for building large multifamily housing development projects as kind of the engine for multifamily production. The other bucket of what we provide is rental assistance. This is what you think of as Section 8 or housing choice vouchers or rental contracts, primarily through the 22 public housing authorities that are in Oregon, one being the Clackamas County Housing Authority. And then the third leg is the grants, both formula and competitive, that we provide to state agencies, several large counties in the state, including Clackamas County, 16 entitlement communities, tribes, and then the nonprofits through the Continuum of Care program. Annual funding in Clackamas County, this is just a high-level snapshot, about $3.4 million a year. In the formula grants, this is your Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, ESG funds, about $4.8 million to the Continuum of Care, about 3.3 to the Housing Authority. Outside of this, there are 19 privately held multifamily properties in Clackamas County that their landlords have contracts with HUD for preserving affordable rents. And then the Community Action Agency, Clackamas County Social Services, receives HUD funding through Oregon Housing and Community Services as the pass-through for that.
So you just saw on the last slide there our annual funding to the Clackamas County the Housing Authority. And I wanted to pull out a couple of key things here. The Housing Authority is one of 5 public housing authorities in the state that partner with their Continuum of Care and the Oregon Department of Human Services Child Welfare Program to implement the Foster Youth to Independence Award program. This is a really big accomplishment. There are 22 housing authorities that are eligible for this program, and the fact that Clackamas County is partnering to implement and utilize these vouchers here really reflects the partnerships between the agencies here at the local level. We talked about the emergency housing vouchers, the 41 that were utilized within that month of receiving the awards. And the Housing Authority also has a moving to work designation, which means that they have increased flexibility in how they run some of their programs. So that's great. And there are over 1,500 new affordable homes that are being built in the community here. And I was privileged to join some of you at the Merrillhurst Commons groundbreaking earlier this year, as you can see in the photo.
All right, this slide is just a map chip of those 19 privately owned HUD-assisted multifamily properties. I want to share this. HUD is not creating any new multifamily contracts. We have the portfolio we do. There's about 450 of these properties in the state. If you hear of a landlord that is said, okay, this is becoming too much, or my rent is going down, or my cost of maintaining these facilities is going up, please let us know. Before anyone turns in the keys, we have the ability to increase the budgets to do things if these properties need a new roof or a new foundation or something like that. But because nationally HUD isn't making any more of these, we want to preserve the properties we have and keep the landlords in business. I want to touch just briefly on the Continuum of Care program. There are 8 Continuum of Cares across the state. One is the Balance of State, which is the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care Community Action Partnership of Oregon. The Oregon 507 is the Clackamas County Continuum of Care. These organizations are the members. They have to submit for grant applications each year from HUD for their renewal projects, and these are the partners in the Clackamas County COC. In the slides and the handouts I've hyperlinked where you can get all these reports, but I bring this up because at HUD we track every year the annual performance of the COCs. How much of the money is spent, how much of it gets returned, what percentage of the awards are going to new projects versus renewals versus expansions, how much, as you can see, is going to permanent supportive housing versus rapid rehousing projects versus supportive services. We also look at the performance of rehousing folks from homelessness in how long someone is homeless and then where are they going? Where are they exiting homelessness to? Is it a permanent supportive housing project? Is it some other service? The folks that are housed, how long are they staying housed, or what percentage of them are returning to homelessness? And then the exits, what kind of programs are they going to? This data is always about a year old. We're always looking back, but it is helpful for tracking COC performance over time. And we can absolutely say that Clackamas County COC is a very high-performing COC in the state. And I think that's been recognized by funding from the governor's office, governor's executive orders, things like that as well. So lots more data. We're happy to dive in with you or your staff on this. One other thing, there are 2 congressionally funded community project fund grants in Clackamas County right now. These are the new congressional appropriations, the earmarks that are back. One award in FY22 through Senator Wyden. This was to Dev Northwest for Community Land Trust Project. And then recently with Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden, about $4 million to the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. The congressional field staff will take applications for these, and they have a ranking and sorting process, and then when Congress's budget comes out this year, they find out how many of these grants go to the state. But there's 2 right now in Clackamas County, and this is just adding to the toolkit for housing folks.
And we cover the whole state, and in our work in both urban and rural Oregon, one of the main economic development and community development challenges that we hear besides housing is childcare. And you're all very familiar with the impacts of lack of childcare in your communities with the Clackamas Workforce Partnership working on this. So we engaged with a interagency federal team to dive into the co-location of childcare and housing and how we can use federal funding sources and HUD funding to support that co-location of childcare and housing. So over the course of several months, this team engaged with rural and urban stakeholders across Oregon and put together a series of case studies for us. They created a map of childcare centers across the state overlaid with subsidized housing and put together a resource guide on best practices and how to access and implement this federal funding. So we would be more than happy to present this report to you and your teams if you're interested.
That's our update for today. We work for you. We are your field staff. For HUD, we have excellent relationships with our partners here, with your staff, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for this really uplifting report from you folks, and I'm happy you came here today. Regarding your slide on page 8 of all of the funding, I have seen personally a lot of this money going out, and I've seen what it does, and it's been a game changer, an absolute game changer in Clackamas County, especially for the community development. And that can go into our rural areas and rural areas that normally wouldn't get funding. And that just, Clackamas County is so rural. We're this dichotomy, as you know, of urban and rural, and because of that, a lot of times our rural areas get left out. I'm very happy about the statistics. I want to thank Commissioner Martha Schrader, who's been working with HUD and the National Association of Counties as our representative to make sure that we are looked at and recognized. And I know commissioners have some further questions on this. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Well, thank you so much, because I've been looking forward to having, I'm not on. I've been looking forward to having you folks here, because what we're finding out at the national level is this childcare issue is actually not only a human resources issue, it's also a community economic and workforce development issue. So we've been partnering with each other at the national level to look at early childhood education. How do we build childcare infrastructure in our communities? And what I was most interested in was your CCDF, which is the child care entitlement to states dollars. And so could you tell me a little bit about that? Because there seems to me that there might be resources, other states have done this, funneled to counties that can actually help us increase our child care infrastructure in our counties. And we've been talking to KinderCare and actually some of our largest traded sector businesses. Daimler, for example, has KinderCare on campus. Siemens actually has their own childcare that is open to the community there. And we're really trying to figure out models with our workforce board and help inform it with the national discussions about how we can increase the number of facilities, capacity, and how do we get those things staffed. So could you give us some more? Is there a NOFO out somewhere that we can notice of funding opportunities available for us to start looking at this with our workforce board?
Thank you, Chair Smith and Commissioner Schrader, for that question. The child care, I think there, as mentioned, there's been so many one-time investments or infusion of federal and state funds at every level, and we want to maximize that you all are spending spend your federal funds first, and then the funds that come from the state, and then if there's not a bucket that's filled by either of those, then county funds, and we're out beating the street trying to make sure that not a dollar of federal money is left on the table if it can be deployed into these things. And that's where, of all these projects that are in the pipeline or underway, we want to come in and see, can state and federal funds be either layered or braided with projects in development for buying down the cost of childcare or making it cost effective for a private employer to put childcare in or adjacent to a publicly supported site. I'm not familiar with the CCDF program enough to speak to it right now, but I can definitely go back and pull some information on that. Absolutely, when NOFOs come available, we've had some new funding recently in addition to the annual funding that you receive, the CPD Pro, zoning, housing. There's going to be a new funding round, CPD price, $250 million for preservation of mobile home parks. As those things come up, we are absolutely communicating with your staff to try to not miss those opportunities. Because there's a lot, as you all know, there's a lot, and you have limitations in what your staff can work on. And so we want to make sure we're getting the right opportunities at the right time. But I'll definitely look on CCDF, and we can follow up on that.
Because I will tell you that one of the things that NACO, National Association, did do is they did lobby Congress, we did lobby Congress, to increase funding for both the mandatory and discretionary dollars to help meet quality standards, invest in childcare infrastructure, and boost supply and serve eligible families. And that is actually in their documentation here. And as I said, we've been working with our Workforce Committee as well as the Human Services Committee because we do see it as an economic development driver. And so I've been talking to, and I know that Chair Smith has talked to developers who may be willing to kind of consider those kinds of on-site. And then I've been talking to KinderCare and other providers to see what is available out there and how can we do public-private partnerships to increase the capacity for our folks here in the county. So I don't think this, and it's really been forged by Bridget Daisy, as you know, is our workforce folks. We are going to be meeting shortly where we're going to be talking about what kind of an outreach program we're going to be doing. Gary, I have some ideas about that, but I'll have to share with everybody else to really get those private-public partnerships maybe moving and accessing dollars from the state and the federal government to get that going. So I really appreciate you being here, and any information you can get me on this and the capacity, and I need to see that report. This is the first time I've heard of it, so I really need to get on the ball. So if you could send us the slides and the report, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I took up a lot of airtime, sorry folks. Okay.
No, we have until we have. Okay. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Guinea and Ms. Ray. Thanks for coming and joining us today. I appreciate your briefing. On slide 10, you mentioned that of the 19 HUD-assisted properties across Clackamas County, we won't be seeing more HUD investment in those types of properties. That is due to budget issues back in Washington, D.C., correct? This is something that's affected all the states. Is this not correct?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so
Commissioner Scholl, yeah, HUD is not either. Congress didn't appropriate funds for that program multiple years ago. It's definitely not an Oregon thing. It's a national thing.
Got it, yes.
Those project-based rental assistance contracts, we're not creating any more of those. So we want to preserve the ones we've got in the state.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So my question on that is, considering the funds that are coming into Oregon from HUD today, many people in the nation expect that in the next few years we will see further restrictions in federal budget. Where we plan and utilize HUD funds for needed housing support in Clackamas County, in the next, say, 2-3 years, do you foresee a need for us to prepare for further HUD funds to be reduced? If we could get a heads up on that, we can anticipate that and look at our other options. What's the story on that?
Thanks, Commissioner Scholl. I don't want to speculate on what levels of funding Congress may or may not put towards different programs, But I can share with you, there's certainly been a lot of great discussion, federal, state, community levels. Anytime there is one-time funding in response to an emergency or a national disaster, or even the massive wildfires, the Community Development Block Grant funding that came as a result of that, there's got to be a consideration for you're putting projects in the ground, you're building things, and then all of these projects have to be maintained. And so creating a new service level and then budgeting for maintaining those facilities. I know those conversations are happening certainly with our congressional delegation for these massive, how to not backslide, like these massive gains have been made in keeping people housed, re-housing people, and how to budget for those funds so that that can be sustained and not just be this one-time blip.
Well, that is a big concern of ours, because on your slide number 5, challenges, as I look at that slide, it's a very sad slide. Oregon is, you got number 1 of people in families with children who are unsheltered, or number 1 for homeless persons with chronic patterns. Number 2, largest absolute increase in 2020 to 2022. So we are dependent to sustain the pressures we're facing on housing from federal dollars, from state dollars. We up just to our north here, we have Metro, which produces the supportive housing services measure. We have the Metro Housing Bond. And so right now, even considering your slide number 5 and the problems we have with keeping people housed, we are dependent on this money coming in to keep people in their house or pay their rental assistance. So this is a big concern of mine. The other thing too I would ask you is, Oregon is the only state in the union that's got this urban growth boundary restriction around all our cities and in the metro area. Can you tell me, from your perspective, how much that is causing the state of Oregon to be experiencing the data on your slide number 5? In other words, if we were another state, if we were Kansas or we were Missouri or South Dakota, who don't have Senate Bill 100 from 1974 that implemented the urban growth boundaries and the metro urban growth boundary, would your slide number 5 look the way it does?
Thanks, Commissioner.
And let me add one more thing. I'm an advocate of the repeal or the modification of the Senate Bill 100 so that counties can have more autonomy in planning and growing, attracting business because of our ability to open up new commercial lands. So from your perspective, tell me, what do you think it's going to take for Oregon to change your slide number 5 to a much more positive slide in the future?
Thanks, Commissioner. The West Coast and the Pacific Northwest have some of the most expensive costs to build new construction in the country. And there are a variety of reasons that you all know very well, land use laws being one of them, environmental constraints, the topography, the expense of putting infrastructure in, our seismic considerations out here, the amount of endangered species that are here in this part of the country, all of these other factors, the amount of people continuing to move into the state and the West, the construction workforce we have, the cost of materials, interest rates, all combine, and land use is certainly a part of that to make this a very expensive place to build. I think to get to the governor's target of 36,000 homes a year, I think we're We're at a deficit of around 140,000 homes just right now in the state. We need 580,000 in the next 20 years. Over half of those need to be affordable. We're only building half that amount right now statewide from where we look at the federal perspective. To get to that 36,000 a year, to even put a dent in that, we're going to need more than just traditional bricks and sticks housing. We're going to need cottage clusters, multiple homes on one tax lot. We're very excited at the work that we see with 3D printed homes or cross-laminated timber, materials that can be used right in Clackamas County's lumber basket, timber basket. And so it can't just be single-family homes, multifamily homes. It's got to be all of these new technologies we haven't used before, we haven't deployed at scale here in Oregon. And so we're happy to work with our partners, public, nonprofit, to try to, governor's office, everybody to try to increase the amount of housing that's produced. Because to do that, to meet these challenges, to get the numbers on that slides down, we've got to get the cost per unit down of what it takes to build a house. We've got to get the time and permitting and all of that stuff down and we've got to have affordable and workforce housing incentivized to be built.
Okay, Mr. Gandy, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Commissioners, do we have any other comments or questions for the presenters today? Commissioner West.
Thank you for being here today. You know, we do have that slide that shows that we still have a lot of work to do, but we also have the slide that shows that Clackamas County's been a leader in an area that's been one of the most problematic in our entire country. I've been on this board for 10 months. I'm super proud of the pivots and the work and the creativity and the innovation and the hard work and the collaboration that we've done here. We haven't always done it the same way as our counterparts in this state, but we've done it the Clackamas County way, and the evidence is clear that it's working. And we're just getting started, and this is definitely a big policy position for not just this board, but we have a mandate from our constituents to take this humanitarian crisis very seriously. And so I'm very optimistic about Clackamas County. Not only has HUD given us a lot of recognition, but we've gotten a lot of recognition across North America. Big media outlets call in and are saying, wait a second, Clackamas County is in the Portland metro area? Because all we hear about Portland is it's real bad, and it is, and specifically in Multnomah County and Portland, but they're like, wait a second, what is Clackamas? But Clackamas County is on the map, and I think we have the ability to be a shining light and a true north as we kind of manage this chaos, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And I see staff in the back that helps us get this done every day and partner with us, and it's totally epic what's happening here, and we're just getting started. So when you come before us next time, I think we'll have even better numbers and more exciting things. And we're seeing other counties and jurisdictions starting to model what we're doing, even in the little ways and sometimes bigger ways. And I think that is evidence of leadership and success. And I think that your guys' testimony, I'm going to brag about Clackamas, I can go on all day, but your guys' testimony here today is congruent with what I'm saying. Oregon's worth fighting for, and we're still fighting for it. We can get through it. So thank you for your presentation today and for working in partnership with us.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Is there any other comments from commissioners on this today? Thank you for coming forward, making an update to us. You're always welcome. And thank you for caring about Clackamas County.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be in touch.
Yes, we'll be in touch. Gary, anything else?
That is all for today, Chair.
Yes?
Well, we have a new Speaker of the House, so that's real nice.
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
Well, it took a while.
we got there.
I believe his name
I'm
is
not-
Mike Johnson.
Yeah, I don't know who he is, but his name's Mike.
Nobody knows who he is. Do we care? There's just a
We have a
body.
speaker.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. See no further business before this commission. We are adjourned.